Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 31 Media Podcast. Today's podcast is in collaboration with the Digital Transformation Awards and the AI Summit and Awards, which are coming up in 2025. These are two separate B2B events that are organized by 31 Media. So if you're interested in attending, speaking, or exhibiting your tech solutions at the event, please follow the link in the description to do so. Today, we are chatting with Kevin, who is the father of virtual assistant and a Silicon Valley innovator. He's a serial entrepreneur, CEO, and a futuristic. He was INC Magazine's Entrepreneur of the Year, CNBC's Top Innovator for the Decade, and World Economic Forum's Tech Pioneer. He was also featured for 5 years on Tech TV's Silicon Spin and inducted into RIT Innovations Hall of Fame. He has 94 worldwide patents, and I'm genuinely excited for this podcast and to talk to Kevin today. So, welcome to the 31 Media Podcast, Kevin. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm so thrilled to even read your bio. Could you give our audience a bit more insight into your life and what else do you do?
Oh my goodness. Well, I do a lot. So there's some awards back here that we were
Mhm.
talking about earlier. Those are all film and Broadway show awards
Yeah.
from work that I've done. My next film is my last film, 1660 Vine, is going to be on streaming very shortly. There'll be an announcement in a few weeks, so that'll be obvious what it is. I hope everyone sees it. It's very cool. It's about influencers, actually. It's about
Oh,
influencers and some podcasters are in there, so you'll really like it. Um, so
yeah.
I do get to do that, but look, I've spent the last 25 years in and around the applied AI space. Now, applied AI is very different than people who are building the foundational models, who are way smarter than I am. But
Hmm.
then there's us who have to apply that and say, this is a new model, this is interesting. How can I apply that to a real business problem, right?
Hmm.
And and I've really tried to focus my life on finding real problems and then solving those problems and hopefully solving them for people who have money to pay you to solve the problems. And
Yeah.
usually that works out pretty well.
Amazing. Yeah, that's such an interesting experience. And I am curious, before we get into the questions and more in depth into AI, my first question to you is that artificial intelligence, it's not like a buzzword anymore, isn't it? Like people are using that in their projects and they've built businesses around it. And it has seen significant advancements in these recent years. From your perspective, what do you think is the most important way that AI has impacted business processes and decision making?
Well, let's first say this is that as was said just a week ago, Sam Altman, I think it was a week ago, he says, look, it turns out deep learning works.
Hmm.
And we understood the concepts of neural networks for decades, but we
Hmm.
didn't really understand what would happen if we could get the math and a lot else right about cloud and GPUs and vectors and all of that until about 2012, when Google had
Yeah.
done some seminal work on solving the problem of having very large deep learning networks, right? And so once
Hmm.
that was solved, you had cloud and you had these, GPUs or TPUs or whatever, you could start doing immense more math out there. And so
Hmm.
OpenAI was the first in Gen AI, and I think that most people are more familiar with that than Core AI, where we've been using Core AI, by the way, for a long time before there was Gen AI. But what's cool about Gen AI is it learned the English language by learning about a trillion phrases. And once you did that, starting in 2017, again, Google did the fundamental research on that. Um,
Hmm.
but by about a couple of years ago, all of a sudden there's this Chat GPT thing out there, and it's the first time that anyone could actually interface with AI without writing code because it understood
Hmm.
English. Now, we've been able to have math models with Excel for decades, 40 years. But it's the
Yeah.
first time we had a language model that really I could just talk to it and it could talk back. Now, we've been doing some tricks to do that since I invented the virtual assistant back in the late 90s. Okay, then 1990s at a company called General Magic. Um, and that technology was wickedly cool. And you could talk to her. Her name was Mary, and she would talk
Hmm.
back and you could have a pretty good conversation, but only within the domains that we wanted to keep you in. So we were very careful to make
Yeah.
sure that we understood we're in the domain of email, and you're probably asking us something about the email. And so we would hard code the sort of the likely things that you would say. And eventually, by listening to enough people, we really could get the rec rates or recognition rates up really high. And people really felt they were having a conversation with Mary. Well, Mary understood about 20 million things you could say, but she didn't understand a trillion things you could say. And that
Mm-hmm.
20 million mostly wasn't self-learned because we didn't have reinforcement learning. We didn't have deep learning. We did have AI from a voice recognition standpoint. So that was the state of the art of the technology then. Today, it's real English. It really can interface with you and interact with you in English. It's still math. It doesn't really understand what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, your question was, how's this working in business? Well,
Yeah.
certainly we are driving the cost of content creation towards zero. Okay,
Yeah.
so what do I mean by that? Um, I can now create images of me on Mars that I could have done in Photoshop before that with 10,000 hours of experience in Photoshop and maybe a handful of hours doing it, right?
Yeah.
And but now I can just push a button, ask for it, and get
I
those
can.
images in 30 seconds or less and use them. I didn't hire
Yeah.
an artist that would have cost me $1,000. I didn't have to do anything but ask for it, right? And content
Mm-hmm.
is generated. Blog posts. I need 5 blog posts about the following 5 things. Boom, here's your 5 blog posts. I need them in
Yeah.
500 words or less. Here it is. I need it in the style of Albert Einstein. Boom, here it is. So if I'm generating content, especially in marketing, it's fabulous. Let's look at podcasters, right? Most podcasters, I haven't asked you about what you're doing, but most podcasters
Mm-hmm.
are no longer summarizing their podcast. They can
Yeah.
they can feed this audio into a model. The model will transcribe it. The transcription will then be fed into another model for summary, and your summary is done in a minute. And you don't have to do
Absolutely.
that work anymore.
Yeah.
There are video editing that will, especially for podcasting, will automatically edit the video down and say, this is what I want to do, and this is what's important, and and it'll just do it for you, right? You could change the languages. By the way, you can change the language of me speaking into another language, and it will resync my lips. Today, this
Oh,
is
yeah.
fabulous. Like all of a sudden, you have a podcast in 10 languages, 20, 30. That costs a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of money. The model takes some time to run, but I've used them and they're fabulous. And all of a sudden, I am speaking any language you want, including Chinese and Swahili, neither of which I speak a word of. So
Yeah.
people are using it for all of that. People are using Copilot in coding. That's a
Mm-hmm.
given. Makes coders about 55% more productive. So this is a game changer for work if you stop playing with it and you start using it for work. Stop playing, start using.
Yeah.
Say, I'm going to use this for work, and I'm going to learn how to get the maximum amount of value out of these technologies. And there's 2,000 companies out there that have done something on top of, GPT models or other models.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the use cases are endless. Like we're living in a world where we can do so much with AI now, especially when it comes to like marketing and content creation, as you said.
Yep,
And focusing more on your experience, and you've been in this world for quite a long time. What do you think are the biggest challenges that organizations are facing when it comes to actually implementing AI, and
sure.
how can they overcome them?
Well, one is training, two is privacy, or one is
Hmm.
privacy and two is training. Uh, three is acceptance. All of those are
Hmm.
issues. All of those are issues for organizations, and we've got to get by those, right? So first is you really have to privatize the models and put security around them. Otherwise, you're training your models on what might be very proprietary information, and that's a
Hmm.
problem for an organization. Second thing is then you've got to train people on it and train them how to get really good at it. And it's not like there's a lot of trainers out there, right? So that's a problem. How do you train people to be really productive? And then third, if some of your people have gotten, I mean, I could give you examples of how someone in marketing might on certain tasks be 10, 20, 50, 100 times more productive than they were just yesterday. A
Yeah.
100 times more productivity. It's 100 brain power, right? If someone's 100 times more productive, then you start to look around and go, maybe there's cost savings here, right? And that's a whole cultural thing. So many companies have begun to use virtual assistants and chatbots backed by LLMs, right? uh, to replace call centers.
Mm-hmm.
Great idea, but you might be saying goodbye to 300 people in your call center in Vietnam, wherever they are, right? And this is going to be en masse. Let's not kid ourselves. So there are certain tasks that are so well done by generative AI. There's no reason to have a human do it whatsoever. With all due respect, right? I'm not trying to be mean. So humans are going to be great
It's
plumbers for a
practical.
long time and great HVAC
Yeah.
repair people. But call centers, tier one, I'd be surprised if there's very many of them, 3 years from now, because
Mm-hmm.
the LLM is a tenth to a hundredth the cost, right? So again,
Yeah.
we're generating content, we're generating responses to people. We can drive down the cost of that. So I think you're going to find corporations, all the CEOs and CIOs I work with and CFOs are very clear what they want to do is I will pay for this stuff, but you better show me where we're going to save money. So if
Mm-hmm.
people are going to be more productive, that's great, but I'm not going to increase my costs without decreasing it somewhere else, right? And that decrease is probably going to impact some tasks and some jobs. In some
Mm-hmm.
cases, it's really good because they couldn't hire enough people for certain jobs. So it makes them more productive and finally closes that gap, right? And that's where we
Yeah.
really want to be. In other cases, they're going to say that so the cost savings is I didn't have to hire additional people. In other places, they may say, well, the cost savings is I don't need that set of people anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think that any technology comes around and it's just going to increase a business's costs, that's ridiculous. Nobody does that. Technology comes and they use it to decrease costs. And so you've got to look around the organization and say, how can I decrease costs? It might be headcount, it might be something else.
Yeah. I think that is the end goal for most of the businesses to decrease the costs by including obviously tech into it. And I've had like a lot of interviews with
Everybody's goal in
people.
business, right? That's
Exactly.
your goal in your business, in your podcast is your goal is to increase your cost. It's to increase the revenue and decrease the cost. That's how you build a
Exactly.
business. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's not a business. It's a hobby.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. And like I've had so many interviews with people who are like into their organizations, they're constantly trying to chase digital transformation, right? Every single year within their strategy, they're trying to see how they can improve themselves with terms of digital processes and leading to transformation in general. So like how do you think like what are the key factors that businesses should actually consider to ensure a long-term success, especially when technological factors and landscapes are changing so rapidly today?
Look, it's always productivity. It could be productivity and improve customer relations, right?
Yeah.
It could be improved employee relations because that also relates to productivity and cost reduction and reduction in turn and workplace happiness and things like that. But in the end, there's no question. Every CEO says, even in digital transformation, what you're trying to do, improve productivity. What's that mean? Ultimately, I'm reducing my costs somehow. There's a set of people I
Hmm.
don't have to hire that I thought I was going to have to fill, and I don't because my people are 10% more productive, 20% more productive. This is
Hmm.
certainly true with AI. The measurement is productivity. No one should kid themselves. Now, again, AI and QA, which we do at AppVance, we introduced our first type of generative AI product back in 2017 when it wasn't using a transformer, it's using a different set of technologies, but it'll generate its own test scripts. And it basically finds its own bugs. It finds bugs in your software by itself. That's the way
Hmm.
to think of it. Um, and you would think everyone in the industry would run to that. Well, but there's all kinds of cultural issues, right? Because if this thing can generate thousands of scripts, thousands of tests in an hour, what do I do with these people in this room? Well, those are my people. I just hired them. What do so you have all kinds of cultural issues in terms of adoption of new techniques and new technologies like this. And also, do I trust the AI? Do I trust it's
Hmm.
generating things that are important and that I want? Uh, so these kind of rollouts still take time. But I do like to say it this way: when you go to hire your next hire, whether it's
Hmm.
finance, marketing, sales, are you going to hire the person that says, "Oh, I've never used any generative AI in my life," or are you going to hire the 22-year-old out of college that says, "I use it on every single assignment in college"? You go, hired. Am I right?
Well, not for every single assignment, but it's good that he knows how to use AI. That's a good thing. Maybe if I could find like a middle ground,
Every
like don't use
student
it in
uses it on
everything.
everyone uses it on every single assignment. Trust
Oh.
me. People say they don't. Every time the instructor
They
says,
lie.
now listen, you are not going to use ChatGPT on this assignment. No problem. You know what that's an indication to is to go use ChatGPT and then use a follow-up cleaner upper basically that then clean I won't tell you
GPT
who they are,
zero.
that then cleans it up so that no one can detect that you
Yeah.
used an LLM. Now,
Yeah.
here's my view of that. I'm on the board of RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and we talk about this a lot. And we say, wow, what's the impact on students and this and that? And I say, guys, our students, we're trying to create the most hireable students. The most
Mm.
hireable students will be those with experience with Gen AI, and those who have deeper experience with Gen AI will get hired faster at a higher salary. So that's what industry wants to hire. So stop telling them they can't use it. Start to create your lessons around the fact they will use it. And if you
Yeah.
don't want them to use any tools, then close the door, shut off all electronics, take a pencil and say, you have an hour to write a paper on X. Have at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine too, by the way. You can still do that, right? We
Mm-hmm.
still do SAT tests where you have no electronics around. But once they go home, I'm sorry, they're going to use calculators. They always did. They're going to use Excel. They're going to use every tool at their disposal, including ChatGPT and other things, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. My view is I want people who leave school and know Excel. I want people who leave school and know ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot and every other tool that's
Yeah.
practical to use out there, because you're going to get hired. And the
Yeah.
kid who says I never use that, not going to get hired. That's
Those
how it
are the
works.
skills that people need these days. Like
That's
AI
right.
is not going to replace you unless you basically leverage that, isn't it? And you
And
know
and
how
you're
to
not
use it.
taking And in college, you can't take a generative AI course because it's too new and none
Exactly.
of those courses are approved. So you just have to use it for all your courses and it's fine. It's not, it's, well, I don't think it's cheating because I think we need to educate people towards getting a job. That's what university is for.
Yeah.
Our goal is
Yeah.
to get you a job. Otherwise, why go? Don't go. You
Mm-hmm.
go because you want to get a good job and you want to grow in the corporation and all of that. So now what I think generative AI does is this, especially generative AI. It makes everyone equally really, really smart. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got people going to school that have an IQ of 95 and you got some that are 105. I'm just saying if the middle's 100, which it's supposed to be. And maybe you got some a little to the left, you got some a little to the right, you got some at 110, you got some at 90. You have this little bit of distribution, right? And of course you have the
Yeah.
geniuses up there, right?
Yeah.
But if everyone uses these tools, pretty much everyone has an IQ of 140 or something like that, right? Everyone is the same. So that means to differentiate yourself, it's not going to be how smart you are. It's going to be how well you use these technologies and your interpersonal skills, which many young people today are not good at because they played video games alone for
Mm-hmm.
20 years. And so interpersonal skills are going to be key because if you want to move to the top of a company, it's rare
Mm-hmm.
when the smartest person gets to the CEO position. It's not rare at all when the most liked person gets there because the people around him or her push them up and say, I want that
Yeah.
person as my boss, right? I want that person as my boss because they understand the personal dynamics. They understand how to manage. They understand all of the interpersonal skills. They understand, having to walk up to your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever and say, I'm sorry, I've fallen out of love. Literally do it rather than do it on social media,
Yeah.
right? That's
Mm-hmm.
really hard. Those are the skills that people should be working on because you're all going to be everyone on earth is going to be 140 IQ. So now what
Yeah.
do? We can't differentiate ourselves there, right? Something to stew
Yeah.
on.
That's not something that people can cheat on or basically use AI for. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. I mean, you
good
can
insight.
try. You can ask it, how should I approach this problem with my boyfriend or girlfriend, right? But still,
Yeah.
in the end, it's two people who have to interconnect, or you managing a team, or you interfacing with a team, or
Mm-hmm.
you've got this great idea and you've got to sell the team on it. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And you will never sell them by being the smartest person in the room. That ruins it. In fact, that's not who you want to be. You want to be listening to every single person and understanding how they think you can make your idea better, right? And
Mm.
have everybody be sort of a part of this. So now it becomes everyone's thing. And if you just
Yeah.
railroad them, you might do it once or twice, but they don't want you as their boss, do they?
Yeah. I'm very sure like a whole lot of people in the audience are going to relate so much with this point. So thank you, Kevin, for that. Moving on to the next question, like when it comes to artificial intelligence, a lot of people they've also questioned about the ethical considerations of it. According to you, what are some ethical considerations that companies should be aware of when they're trying to integrate AI into their operations,
Sure.
especially when
Well,
it comes to privacy and security?
sure. So there's privacy and security, that's one thing, but most companies are forcing privatized models and dealing with that way. But there are other ethical concerns. Of course, there's the ethical concerns of deep fakes and interactive deep fakes on Zoom. You don't know that
Hmm.
I'm actually real. I don't know that you're actually real right now because there
Yeah.
are interactive deep fakes. And that's going to promulgate. There's going to be more of those. They're going to ask people to do things that people think are right for their company, and then it wasn't really their boss. It's already happened. Someone wired $25 million to an account and couldn't get it back because they listened to their boss on Zoom, but it wasn't their boss. It was an interactive deepfake. We have AI being
Hmm.
used by the bad guys to create phishing emails that are indistinguishable from human emails. And they're very,
Yeah.
very good. And so all that training you've got on phishing isn't going to work. You've got to up the cybersecurity to next generation MFA. I'm working with a company called Token Ring. That's what they do. We've invented a ring that you put on. It works on your finger with your fingerprint. It doesn't work for anyone else. And so
Hmm.
it's a biometric ring, and only you can get access to your applications. Very important
Ah.
for security and enterprise, especially
Hmm.
financial services and healthcare and things like that. Then there's bias. So
Hmm.
all of these models learned from the human existence, and humans are naturally biased. And we know about racial bias and things like that, but there's simple bias. So for example, if I'm interviewing someone and they happen to be from my university, I am more likely to hire them, whether or not they're the best candidate, just because we have something in common and we start talking and there's this interchange, and that's what people do, right? But that's
Hmm.
a bias. That's not a bad bias or good bias, but it is a bias that's built in the system. So this has happened in all of the models. So for most models, if I said, randomly, give me an image of, I'm making it up, a CEO of an American company, it's probably
Yeah.
going to be a 65-year-old white male. Why? Well, because it just learned that that's sort of sitting in the center of the bell curve. That's unfair to everyone else,
Yeah.
every female, every person of color, so unless you ask it and say, I need a person of color, I want them to be female, and I want them to be young, and it's not going to do that because it just goes right to the center. So there's this inherent bias, and the
Hmm.
problem with that inherent bias is all of this stuff could create a terrible feedback loop going forward, because you're asking it to generate that image. It generates the image. You now put that image out there as a typical CEO of a public company in the United States, and everyone
Hmm.
else does that. And now it takes the center and makes the center like this. And what it does is limit the whole experience of humanity to this thing, because
Yeah.
now the next models learn on more of itself and more of itself and more of itself until there is no human experience out of that center point.
Hmm.
This is true with the text we're writing. So we're finding now that the new models going out to learn from more stuff are picking up much more of generated stuff that was generated
Hmm.
by itself. So
Hmm.
ChatGPT, say GPT-5, is clearly learning from a lot of what GPT-4 or 3.5 already generated and people put out there. And this is a terrible
Yeah.
feedback loop that makes the model dumber, not smarter, right? It didn't learn
Hmm.
anything from relearning itself. So so there's a real ethical problems in that, and I don't know that we have an easy solve for that. That's a tough one, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it is like I think getting to a point where it is sort of self-learning, but it also depends upon like what people are actually putting out there on the internet, as you mentioned. But yeah, it is quite a difficult answer. Um, but in your experience, like you've mentioned wearable tech and the ring, for example, looking ahead, like what do you think are the most exciting developments in AI and technology that you think will actually shape industries in the next decade?
Well, agents are the first. There's really two big things. These models that are kind of isolated right now are going to become agents for us, so that
Hmm.
I will be able to say, contact the team at 3-1 Media or AI Awards Summit or Digital Transformation Awards or whatever they are. Contact them. I need the following thing. And they will call you on my behalf and say, hi, this is Mary. I'm Kevin's digital assistant or personal assistant or virtual assistant. I need
Mm-hmm.
the following data. Or the
Mm-hmm.
agent may contact your agent and they'll talk together. So agents that do things for us are going to be far more interesting than just generating content or evaluating
Mm-hmm.
content. I think that's super exciting. The second thing is that the advance in robotics, in humanoid robotics in the past year, is mostly due to a change in the way we train them. So the way we've been training robots forever is we've been literally coding in what they will do. So if I wanted to get a robot to make coffee, I would continue to write code and logic until it was able to make coffee in a coffee maker correctly. That's what I would do. And I'd keep correcting it. It
Mm-hmm.
has vision, it has dexterity now. Can
Mm-hmm.
I correct what it does? But in the last year, some very smart people decided, hold it. We have reinforcement learning. Um, let's just say that it only wins once it makes a cup of coffee. We define what that is, and then we just put it in front of a coffee maker and let it spill stuff all over the place for hours or days. And eventually it will make the cup of coffee by itself and learn how to do that. And once it's learned how to do that, it built its own neural net on how to do it, right? That's reinforcement
Mm-hmm.
learning. I
Yeah.
didn't have to program anything, it'll learn for itself. So for the first time this year, we started doing that. And this is crazy now because we thought that for a robot to come and cook in your kitchen or clean the dishes, the amount of coding that would be required would be so ginormous as to be possibly impossible,
Yeah.
probably improbable, right? Impact, maybe it's $100 billion of code and, I don't know, a million coders or something crazy, right? I don't know, 100,000 coders. Now with reinforcement learning, I don't have to do that at all. It can learn by itself how to put
Mm-hmm.
dishes in a dishwasher. Then I can put it in 100 different kitchens to learn where the dishwashers are and what a dishwasher looks like all over the place and how to unload it and then where the dishes go. So it can teach itself. And now when you have a robot teaching itself, we can imagine a day very soon in the next, certainly less than 5 years, where you can have a humanoid robot in your kitchen that cooks and cleans. And we all want
Mm-hmm.
that. We all want it
Yeah.
cheaply. I don't know that it'll be cheap. It might be $25 an hour, but nevertheless, this is a
Yeah.
fascinating thing. So now I have robots doing physical things for me, which I've never had, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can talk to them in English. They do physical things, whatever those are. And I can have agents that are software virtual agents that will also do my bidding and go out and do what they need to and come back. So these are the two big changes in the next 5 years, certainly. And I think they're the most exciting, and they're built on everything that we've built thus far, right? AI,
Mm-hmm.
Gen AI, deep learning. It's the most exciting time to ever be alive with technology. It's fascinating.
Yeah, gosh, you've mentioned so many things to reflect upon and to research for our audience. So thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing all of this knowledge. I mean, this podcast has been fantastic, and full of knowledge. But thank you again for your time on the
You
podcast
bet.
today. It was really nice chatting with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.